Argument on one column, argument on two. Let's get on to the other side now, to arguments 3 and 4. The option is now B. God does exist, and what are the pros and cons there? Circumstantial, anthropic, and logical analysis, and what else you see on the board. Let's go to circumstantial. Billions believe in God. If there's only one person who tells me that he or she saw a little cow with the heads on both sides of the body, I'll say, yeah, give me another one. But if 10 people say, no, we did see a little cow with 2 heads, one on this side and one on the other side, I'll say, yes. If 200 people tell me that they did see it, then I'll start scratching my head and saying, I wonder. If 10,000 people tell me that they did see it, then I believe, in all honesty, I should shift my mind from disbelief to at least there being a possibility. That is the meaning of circumstantial evidence. It is not a proof. It just shows that there is a possibility. It's not 10,000. There's billions who believe in God, who are willing to say, I know from inside that there is a God in existence. So I must not stand and say, whoosh, and wipe it off. The correct, honest way would be to say, is that a big number? Then, well, I wonder if it's possible. And that's it. Number 2, it's very deep in human psyche, in the human mind. Our history of the human race that we can go back to reaches about 5,000 years. And in all these 5,000 years, written, or at least claimed to be written, there has never been even one generation on this earth in our entire history where the idea of the supernatural has been wiped off. Never, not even one single generation. It is so deep, and if something lasts for 10 years, we must give it some credibility, don't you think? If that same idea lasts for a century, then there is a certain credibility that is inherent right there. If it lasts for thousands of years in billions of people's minds, then I believe the correct way to look at it is there's a possibility. Number 3 is the presence of design. Like we said just a moment ago, it is not design that is bitty and small. It is precise. It is complex. It is huge. And right here I might appeal to another science, the science of archaeology. Have you ever heard of an archaeologist who very carefully goes to his dig and brushes off the dust from a little ornate pillar, for instance, with nice markings there? And he says this is a prize find in his dig, and he brings it to his table and puts it there, stands back, and it said happened by itself. Never. From a broken piece of pottery, an archaeologist looking at those markings and the color and whatever else he wants to look at will tell you when it was made, which country, possibly the language the person spoke, his social status, maybe his financial status too. Why do we give him that credibility? Because of the very simple, logical, stepwise approach that anything that is a design requires the explanation of having a designer somewhere along the way. If you see a design, there must be a designer. And that is why he will brush off the dirt, but keep this pillar. The dirt obviously does not have a design. He is not interested in that. The pillar has a design. And so when he looks at a design, he starts working on the idea of who the designer is. And that is why we have so much of historical evidence of our past. Because you see any design, it calls for a designer. and the characteristics of the designer. The fact is really, he threw off the dirt. And what if I tell you, or what if I tell the archaeologist, if you look carefully into dirt and look at the molecules that form the dirt, there is a precise design in the dirt itself. Then shouldn't the archaeologist go looking for the designer of that as well? Yes, of course. Any design, if you did it at that place, why do you not do it in this place too? So to be consistent, any design, your first bet shouldn't be that it happened by itself. You must look for the designer. And the design right is anything but small. If there's a broken vase, can you look just at the jagged edge and say there's no design here? A broken vase is still a vase. Why? Because despite the broken edge, you see design in the rest of it. In other words, if any phenomenon, if any place has design and non-design within it, then the design takes precedence. And you do look for a designer. But these are all only circumstantial evidences. We go to anthropic principle. This word anthropos means human. It was coined by Brandon Carter, a British physicist, and it talks about those factors that allow humans or life to exist on any planet. Factors that contribute to and sustain human life on a planet. We're going to look at two of them, maintenance of life and conditions for research. Maintenance of life. The expansion rate. Do you know that our universe is expanding? And it is expanding at a certain rate. If it goes a little slower or a little faster, life would be impossible. And look what the number is. Take the expansion rate of the universe, which is fine-tuned to 1 part in a trillion, 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 trillion. That is, if it were changed by 1 part in either direction, a little faster, a little slower, we could not have a universe that would be capable of supporting life. Just the expansion rate. Gravity. It's incomprehensibly narrow range. The strongest nuclear force in nature is called the strong nuclear force, which holds protons and the neutrons together in the center of an atom. That is the strongest force that we know in nature. The weakest force that we know in nature is gravity. Even a little ant will lift a leaf against gravity. It's the weakest force in nature. Now suppose you draw a line and put millimeter marks on the line and draw the line out from here around the world and go off to the moon and onto the sun 93 million miles away and go clean across our galaxy and swing this line out to the 10,000th galaxy. Now it's gone past our minds. Millimeter marks on this line. Then the scale of the power that's in the universe, the spectrum is, if the strong nuclear force is way out on the 10,000th galaxy, gravity is on millimeter number 1. That's the spectrum. Now what will happen if you shift gravity to millimeter 2 on that line that goes from here to the 10,000th galaxy? All you're going to shift it is from 1 millimeter to 2. Do you know what will happen? Our Earth, which is 7,000 miles in diameter, will shrink to a globe that is only 40 miles in diameter. All life will cease. If you just shift gravity to the 2nd millimeter mark, and that is why they say that gravity has an incomprehensibly narrow range for life to exist. If the fine-tuning of this statement, I didn't put it up there, but this is called the cosmological constant. Don't worry about these big names. The cosmological constant is just the density of matter in space, the whole of space. The density of matter has to be a very correct amount. If it is too much, all matter will collapse, all galaxies will collapse. If it is too little, they'll all fly apart. It has to be very fine-tuned to a billion, 100 million, billion, 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 billion. That's the number. So in other words, it moves one mark away, gone. Who is controlling all of that? When you combine the two, gravity and cosmological constant, the fine-tuning would be to precision of 1 part in 100 million, trillion, 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 trillion. That would be the equivalent of one atom in the entire known universe. Take all the atoms. Look, in my body itself, I'm not a big guy. I have about 75 trillion cells. 75 trillion cells, not atoms, cells. So you line up all these cells and then break them up into atoms and line all the atoms, yours, mine, the trees, the mountains, the seas, this earth, moon, planets, everything, 125 billion galaxies. And if the needle was supposed to be on atom number 510, that's where it is. It is not on 509, it's not on 511. Fine-tuned, absolutely fine-tuned. How about a situation? Now it's not a place like, front row, and I don't want to sit in the front row here, I want to sit in the side here. No, it's a position in the galaxy. Our position in the galaxy. We happen to be situated safely between the Sagittarius and Perseus spiral arms. I cannot come up with an example of another place in the galaxy that is as friendly to life as our location. Any other place will have too much of radiation, for instance, and we would cease to exist. It's only in the very inner edge of the circumstellar habitable zone, that is, the distance from the sun, in which we have low enough carbon dioxide and high enough oxygen to sustain complex animal life and human life like yours and mine, and that's where we are. Who put us there? Over the past 30 years or so, scientists have discovered that just about everything about the basic structure of the universe is balanced on a razor's edge for life to exist. Conditions for research. Do you know that this earth is, according to what we can observe in the universe, the only place in the universe where you can see and experience a total solar eclipse? The moon is 232,000 miles away from us, and it occupies an area in the sky that much. The sun is 400 times the mass of the moon, and it is exactly 400 times away. And so it also occupies the exact same area in the sky. And that is why we can have a total solar eclipse, because they occupy the exact same area in the atmosphere. So what's so great about a total solar eclipse? Well, scientists tell us that it is the only phenomenon during which they can study the color spectrum of our sun. A certain color spectrum is available only during a solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse. And because of that, we can extrapolate and study other stars. So, conditions for research. Not only that, Einstein's theory of relativity is a theory and a mathematical calculation and a formula that relates to all existence of the whole universe. This is the existence of matter in a total solar eclipse. That is the only phenomenon where you can observe one part of Einstein's theory of relativity, which says gravity can bend light. Can you imagine that? This earth is the only place where you can have an observable part of Einstein's theory of relativity. Nowhere else. In every other place in the universe, it will be a theory. Here, we can observe it because there is a total solar eclipse going on. And why? Because these bodies are exactly positioned in the distance they are and the size they are. Amazing? Amazing? Wow? No? It's that incredible coincidence that creates a perfect match. How about our location? Our location away from the galaxy's center in the flat plane of the disk provides us with a particularly privileged vantage point for observing both nearby and distant stars. The very composition of our atmosphere gives it transparency. If not, we wouldn't have been able to observe anything outside our Earth. It is this, that we find a universe where the very places where we find observers are also the very best over places for observing. That is surprising. I see design in this pattern of habitability, meaning the factors that allow us to live, and measurability, the factors that allow us to do scientific measurements. So not only are these factors allowing us to be alive, these factors are the only place that allow us to do any scientific observation as we know in any other part of the universe. Amazing. Logical analysis. Logic requires some facts to which you put reasoning. And I appeal now to an argument which is very old. It's called the Kalam cosmological argument. It was enunciated way back then. 3 steps, very simple. Whatever begins has to have a cause. This universe had a beginning. The universe then has to have a cause. It is so simple and yet so profound. I took that and made it into my PAN process and decided to take another little factor somewhat similar, but here's how it goes. Science also has a philosophy. It's kind of an oxymoron, but it does have a philosophy. Science doesn't mean only knowledge. Science doesn't mean only a method of inquiry. It is also a philosophy. And here's the philosophy of science. It's called materialism or naturalism. And that says that all that there is in existence are these 4. Matter, energy, time, and space. And they are governed by physical laws. There is nothing beyond this. There is nothing supernatural. That is the philosophy of science today. So we take that, everybody agrees to that, that's their philosophy, that is the claim. If that's the claim, that means all matter, that is all material, that is all matter, energy, space, time, had a beginning. And we call the beginning the Big Bang. Do you know what banged? People think it's a globe. No. It's a point. So small that has no dimensions, where the entire energy of the universe was locked up. Because matter and energy are interchangeable. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, matter and energy are interchangeable. Once upon a time there was no matter, there was only energy, and energy does not occupy space. So all the energy of the entire universe was locked up in that one bitty little point with no dimensions. And that is what exploded. Boom! 125 billion galaxies from there. But it had a beginning. Now, the cause of an end product, like this pointer. It is quite unreasonable for me to say that the pointer is the cause of the pointer, right? If I looked at a table, wooden table, nobody ever says that the table is the cause of the table. Nobody even ever says that wood is the cause of that table. You could say that the carpenter was the cause of the table. But the moment you say that, the carpenter is distinct from the wood and the table. In other words, the cause of a product is always transcendent or distinct or lies outside of that. Always. And that is the logic that we are using here. So now we go back to all matter. All material then consists of matter, energy, time, and space. Therefore, the cause of energy, matter, time, and space cannot be found within energy, matter, time, and space. The cause is distinct. It lies outside. In other words, it is distinct from it, it has to be then supernatural. There are two factors that come in, two characteristics that we see about this cause then. Number one, matter is very complex, very intricate, very precise. And therefore, the cause of that kind of a matter would have to have some kind of intellect to make it so precise. In other words, a giant intellect. And this is what Einstein talked about when he said, when he looked at the universe, said he was in rapturous amazement at the harmony of natural law, which reveals an intelligence of such superiority that compared with it, all the systematic thinking and acting of human beings is an utterly insignificant reflection. So it is a giant intellect. If you think of the power that there is, energy, how much energy is there in the universe? Huge amount. Then the cause of that energy should be able to supply that energy, supply the energy to those mighty clusters of galaxies there, as well as have a sufficient control of that energy to control the smallest subatomic particle inside an atom. That is the concept we see, because this is an observation, this is not an opinion. It's an observation that matter is very precise and complex, and energy is massive. So, brilliant intellect, awesome power. Could this be God? I'll quickly address just two of the questions. There are a bunch of them. We will do them tomorrow, as many as we can. Number one is, how do we know that Earth is the only place where we can observe a total solar eclipse? I do not know. I can only state what evidence we have. And in looking out, astronomers tell us that there is no other place where this combination exists. So if they are wrong, well, I don't know. But they tell us that there is no other place where a planet has a moon or a satellite and a star that is at that distance and at those sizes. They could be wrong, but that's what they tell me. Now, the other way to answer that, for you, whoever asked, and for all of us, is to say, well, I don't think so. I don't think. And therefore, I would like to propose that there is another place. And then give me the evidence for the other place. Is that fair enough? Yeah. Because if you want to make, like I would like to state, that you can easily poke holes in people's arguments, but it is good as an inquirer to have two propositions. Then you can have 4 lines of argument. So if you say this is not possibly what it is, then tell me what is, and then we'll look at both. That's the balanced way of looking at it. The other is, or the other question, who designed the designer? Excellent question, actually, because we're looking at logic, right? Who designed the designer then? Logical, good question. But remember, logic must be placed on some pieces of information. You need 2 things if you want to make a conclusion that's a good logical conclusion. You need some pieces of information on which you use logic. If the pieces of information is faulty, then no matter how good the logic, your conclusion will not stand. If your pieces of information is good, but you use faulty logic, you will still end up with a wrong conclusion. In this case, to ask who designed the designer, we must go to the pieces of information, not the logic, because the logic is good. Who designed the designer? Because we told ourselves that when you see something that has a design, you must look for the designer. So who designed God? The fault is not in the logic, the fault is in the claims that are being made. And when you have a claim, you must not change the claims. You must shoot it down by a good argument, but not change the claims. The claim of God is that He is not, He, she, it is not created, timeless, beginningless, without end, without beginning. That is the claim. Now you got to shoot the claim down, but not change the claim. So the claim is that this creator was not created. That's the claim. So if you say, no, the creator was created, okay, then let's put it on one column and put the other one on the other column and have your arguments for and against either of those. Is that fair enough? Yeah. If you say that the creator, this designer was designed, then show me some evidence for that. Because you're making a claim. I'll leave that with you. Because it's a good way of doing a pan process. Go ahead. And that's your search. And that is the way you look at it. But I would suggest, do not change the claim. That will not be fair, because if you do that, then you can win all the arguments on earth. You can just change the argument there and then shoot it down from here. That is not being reasonable. Don't change the claim. You have arguments for and against the claim, but don't change it. That's my response. It's not an answer, it's a response.